Dania Cabello, and this is Neighborhood Stories. So I was born in Oakland, California in 1983, but my parents and my sisters exiled to the Bay Area from Chile in 1976. They fled political persecution. There was a dictatorship that started in 73 that murdered members of my family, imprisoned them, tortured them, and my parents and sisters were forced to flee for their lives. And the Bay Area, there was a bit of cosmic chance that they landed here of all places. We did have a family member that anchored us to this place, but other than that, it kind of felt like a crapshoot that they landed in Oakland, where I was born. My early memories of growing up in the town were a combination of like bike riding through every street, every neighborhood with my cousins, while my parents worked my parents had small mom and pop shops in Oakland. And so there was kind of this like strong neighborhood vibe of like, I knew all the vendors, I knew all the owners of every liquor store, every candy shop. And there was also this strong element of soccer that was introduced to me by my uncle Alex, who was my first coach when I played for the Rockridge 49ers back in 1980, maybe like 89 or 88. I was too young for the team. It was like I was just about to be in kindergarten and I was with maybe first graders. And honestly, the rest is history. Like, I touched the ball and I never stopped playing, never stopped chasing the soccer ball all throughout California, and played kind of in every league that you've heard of in the Bay. You're like, oh, Rockridge, and I played for the Marin Rockers and the Bay Oaks. And I went off and played in college at UC Berkeley. Soccer was a huge anchor in my life. It was a place where I learned to make a lot of meaning, and is a place that I'm continue to be a student of the game, to make meaning as an adult now. I definitely had aspirations of being like one of the best. Playing on the U.S. national team was a dream of mine. I think I still have a little fourth grade biography that I wrote of like my future self, and it was like Dania Cabello, number 8, USA. You know, I had practiced my autograph as a kid. I had Mia Hamm posters on my wall growing up. Like, that was goals. That was like the trajectory I was on. But also, I didn't come from a family that really understood like what it would take. Playing professional wasn't something we talked about. It wasn't relevant, really. But I kept playing and I kept performing well, and just by the virtue of the access that I had to different clubs, like playing ODP, playing on state teams, and gaining visibility from collegiate coaches, and just like being in this like really elite and exclusive soccer culture, I, as a first generation daughter of political exiles, was able to kind of play and continue on this path that at the time I was kind of an anomaly, in the sense that there weren't many Latinas or first gen immigrant kids playing on any of the teams that I was on, for the most part. And I didn't really realize until high school that I was just already on the trajectory to be seen by colleges, and that was the pathway to play professional ball. And so if I were to like skip over, 15 years of playing soccer in the Bay Area, I ended up getting seen by the coaches at UC Berkeley, and that's where I played collegiate ball for 4 years. I was co-captain my last 2 years, and it was during my junior year that the Women's Professional League in the US, which I think was having its second go-around. I had been training in the summers with a team that housed so many of my mentors and soccer idols like Cici, Brechina, Brandy Chastain was on the team, and I just thought oh, that's next. So I thought I was on this trajectory to play with the Cyber Rays and play professional ball in the US, and then it was my junior year that the league folded, and I was part of this generation of young women who didn't necessarily have a professional home once we finished playing. I had peers that went and played in Europe. I think one woman I knew went and played in China. And for me, I was like, all right, well, I guess we did that in college. And I used my second semester of my senior year in college when soccer season was over to go live a little and to become kind of a normal student, a collegiate student, and I studied abroad in Brazil. And when I was in Brazil, there was this kind of again, what I feel is cosmic timing, where my Cal coach met the head coach of the women's professional team in Santos at a conference. And he was like, oh, my captain is studying in Brazil right now. And the coach was like, oh, well, half of our national team players are prepping for the World Cup. We need players. So I got flown to Santos to try out while I had kind of for a few months put soccer on the back burner, oh, we finished. And then the next thing you know, I'm with this coach Clayton in the Santos Stadium at the Pelé, I call it the Pelé Museum. It's the Santos Museum, but it was for me, it was Pelé's museum. Having my first introduction to my dream, which was to play professional soccer, but not just on any random team, on Pelé's club team. And one of the coolest stories I have of that tryout journey, which lasted 5 days, is that first day when he took me to the museum, he showed us a video documentary of when Robinho, during the Paulista Cup tournament, his mother was kidnapped by, I don't know, some gang. And it was this whole story about how he couldn't play soccer, and it was right before the tournament. And long story short, he goes back to the field and his mom was found, and his teammates come and they're hugging and they're crying, and it's super emotional. And I'm losing it. I'm bawling, but trying to have this coach next to me not notice that it shook my whole world. And at the end of the tryout, when I'm telling the girls I made it, I get to stay in the house with you all, and I get to play, and this is, I feel so humbled and grateful. And the captain came in, I'll never forget. She was so just kind of ice cold with it. And she was like, you made it on the first day you got here. And I was like, what do you mean? And she goes, coach takes every international player to the museum to sit and to watch and do everything you did, but you were the first player to ever cry. And he knew he wanted you from that moment. And for me, I'm that's the coolest way of making Santos. Forget my skill set, that he felt that my heart was in the right place meant more to me than how good I could kick or run. Playing for Santos, when I talk about the experience, I have much fonder memories than kind of the lived experience, in the sense that, first let me just say that the women I played with were incredible. Some of the most talented ballers I've ever trained with. And joyful. There was just such a beautiful culture to be a part of. And I knew that I was a part of something really special. But I also came from a position of a lot of privilege, having played Division I ball at Berkeley, where we were flown across the country and we had all the Nike gear you could ever not need but have. And so to then go play ball as a woman in South America, there was these dynamics of power that just like didn't add up right. And so there were some parts where I felt much more professional as a Division I collegiate athlete than as a person playing in South America, where because of the way sexism works, classism, I hit a moment where I was going through other things in my life that made it hard for me to prioritize soccer in that moment. And I was like, this is a fight and a plate that needs to be pushed and fought, but I don't think that this is my plate. Like, I don't think that this is where I want to put my energy of like battling to be taken seriously as a female athlete. And so I ended up leaving thinking that I would one day return. But my life just took me in many other beautiful directions, and that was one of them. There were 2 years after I left Santos where I didn't touch a ball. This was in my early to mid-20s, and I was having a really difficult time distinguishing the culture of sport that I had been a part of for most of my life with my own kind of values and politics and my own joy. And I was having just this moment of like, pause, like time out. I need to not be around this. There's way more to life than this like 11v11 soccer in the middle of nowhere, California, and your whole life evolves around it, from what you eat to how you think to who you're with. And I was just like, I'm tired. What would it look like if I could choose my own friends, and if I could choose my own style, and if I could move different and like not hurt? I was also going through a lot of physical pain from the sport, so I had to stop cold turkey. And part of that too was a super personal journey of, you know, I mentioned that my family were political exiles. Being the daughter of people who live in exile and or living in exile yourself is like living an existence of a borrowed context. Like, you're here, but the memories and the nostalgia are for some place like I never knew. Where are my roots? How did I get here? And there was a lot of questions for me of like, I grew up in a family that was really traumatized, that suffered a lot in ways that are not unique to my own family. Like, I swear half of Oakland has dealt with what we've dealt with, from murder to exile to having to migrate, leave your family, learn a new language, raise children in an unfamiliar place. And like, all of this was what shaped me. And then realizing I'm in the country, like I'm the daughter, I'm an American woman who was born and raised in the country that literally uplifted, supported, armed, and trained the military dictatorship that ruined part of my family's life. So I was dealing with this contradiction, and sport is a place where, I mean, for those of us who spend a lot of time in it, it's a place where we make meaning. It's a place of meaning making. Our body is making meaning. Like, sport, if we look at it from a sociological perspective, like, it mirrors society. And so there was this time where I pieced out on soccer for a minute while my brain started doing work and my spirit started doing work of understanding, like, so what else about sport? Because I was kind of stuck in this critique of it, like the militarization of it, how sexist it is, like all the things I couldn't do that my male peers could go off and do, play in the MLS. Like, I dealt with jealousy and anger and frustration. And then it turned into something that I feel is like beautiful, and it's been part of my own liberation from my angst and like understanding who I am and where I come from. And one of the ways in which I started to do that was freestyle soccer. And freestyle is like, it's different than soccer. It's a physical expression, it's musical, it's rhythmic. there are no rules and there are no limitations. And so it was kind of like an embodied space where I got to be a mover and a dancer and like flow in a whole new way that brought me joy, didn't bring me pain, that I could do on the streets. And it became something political also, of like, you're gonna see my body on the street. You may not see it in the national stadium, but guess what? When you get off the BART train, you're gonna see my body moving beautifully and gracefully and joyfully. And that in and of itself it's a form of communication. And so I kind of took that concept and have been running with it ever since. You know, freestyle has been a beautiful manifestation of these elements, but also sport for me is political, it's spiritual, it's physical, and I don't expect everybody to see it that way. Like, some people just play sport because they like the competition. Some people play because they're like, it's just about fitness. And, you know, and of course some people weave it all together. But for me, sport is my meaning-making space. And if what I'm trying to bring awareness to or attention to, that like it can be a political space and it can be a spiritual space, if we develop the right kind of language to talk about that and acknowledge it, I feel like if it speaks to you, then let's chat. And sometimes that chat is like this, with words and stories. Sometimes it's metaphorical. And sometimes it's just like my body, our bodies moving and playing in different ways. You know, so it started, like my journey with sport and education started from just a personal exploration. I had no idea 20 years ago that I'd be like identifying as kind of a critical sport pedagogue, somebody who thinks about how we think through sports, and the possibility it holds. And I felt like there's so much possibility in sport that I wanted to welcome others to explore that with me. I don't have like an answer of this is what sport is and this is how it should be. But I found that through education, when people are asked questions, especially athletes, about their experience and what their life has been like and how they got there, like we're doing right now, people want to talk about it. And in their own answers, kind of without me saying like, that was kind of political, or like, oh, that was messed up, or oh, that was really cool, they have their own realizations of like what sport is and what it can be. And so one of the ways I like to kind of share with people this intersection of like sports and education is that there's this element in education, like in critical education, the kind that's supposed to set us free and, you know, that's emancipatory, is that it is a tool to push limits and to create space. And I mean, come on, what is sport about? Sport is about pushing limits and creating space. And so those two things, I'm like, that's what this is about. And if we can use that sports field as a place to make that kind of meaning, where it's not just about following the rules. Like, yeah, there's a set of rules and we do it, but also, if you're really good, it's about pushing that limit and creating space for each other. And at the core, sport can be many things. And what I'm interested in is bringing people into these conversations around, if you spend so much time in sport, then it's worth making even more meaning than what we see in mainstream. Like, yeah, it's about winning is fun, don't get me wrong, I like to win. But like, also, what else? It's not just about discipline and time management. Those are important things, yes. But if we can start making these meanings around like whose space, who's included, who's not, in this space that we spend so much time in, then chances are when we move through the world, in our workspace, in our school space, we're going to be able to apply that critical analysis. Like, sport is all about critical analysis. We just don't call it that, you know, when you're making that decision in the split second. And it's beautiful. And how did we get there? Because we trained and we practiced and it hurt and it was uncomfortable. Yeah. So when people talk about like, oh, we are social justice in sport and we are this and we want inclusivity, it's like, yes, that is an end goal, but the journey to get there is probably not going to feel good. And it may be challenging and uncomfortable, and we need to learn. We can learn. That's what I'm trying to say, is that like, and there's a possibility that we can. For those of us that want to hold that space for a little bit of discomfort so that we can push through to create something more beautiful, so that when we're done, so that when a younger version of me is 20 and her career in that way is over, that she doesn't have to go 2 years without touching a ball. That she can know, or he can know, or they can know that I'm a forever athlete, whether I have 11 other people to play with, and that's part of my freedom, and that's part of my power. And too often I hear the narrative of like, oh, I no longer play, or I used to play, or I stopped. I was an athlete once. And it's like, this is a forever, like me and this game, we're a forever relationship, and it's evolving. I definitely don't play the way I did when I was 18, but I play. I'm excited and juiced that there's about to be, the Oakland Soul women's team, that there's more women's teams popping up through California, Los Angeles. And I think that it's a testament, one, to just the culture that we as women have upheld, not just myself, but the women that came before me who've like paved a way for us to have a niche. So I think that the dollars are finally following, where the culture actually is. And I just see that there's this moment of possibility. Like, we're doing this in the Bay Area, and a lot of people associate the Bay Area with like progressive politics and like the home of the Black Panther Party and the civil rights movement. And there's ways that people can kind of pitch that and just kind of like trail on the coattails of that without doing the work. And like any franchise or corporation, if you get the money to do what you're going to do, what distinguishes you from an Amazonian type corporation, right? Like, and so I feel like we're at this crossroads where money isn't enough. Money is baseline. Pay us, fund us, invest in us to go ball and be incredible athletes as we always have been. And that there's this other moment now where I feel like the kind of work that I'm talking about, there's an opportune moment for incorporating critical analysis into sport instruction and like how we teach athletes, so that they understand how dynamics of power work. And like, not that we don't all intuitively understand it, but just like have the words for it, so that when we as athletes feel like we're being undermined, instead of just being frustrated about it or chatting about it on the side, we have actual language to empower and engage in dialogue that will push systems forward, that need to challenge those in positions of ownership. Because when we look at who's still in the ownership positions of these institutions, it looks and sounds very much like most corporations or franchises, where race and sex and class are the leading factors. And so I'm just really hopeful that like as women get invested in, that we also invest in kind of not just the baseline of like, okay, you have the right equipment, but also I guess it's about our minds and our spirits. It's like taking care so that we don't burn out, harm our bodies. So I don't know, my hope is that there's a future in which critical sports analysis that relates specifically to like our spirit and our physical well-being is part of the narrative of what we're investing in. And not just for women, for all athletes. If I could communicate one thing, it's that I love sports so much. I know that my story is not unique. It's about reclamation and healing, because sports isn't always a healing space. We must work to make it emancipatory, joyful, beautiful, challenging. Like, I love it that much that I want us to go there. The only reason I use sport as my vehicle is because that's what I love.